Hello and welcome to this next training video from the EXP group. So we're on chapter 1 of the express notes for CIMA E1 enterprise operations, and as I mentioned in the previous video, I really would recommend that you download a copy of the free express notes, and these express notes can be obtained from our website free of charge. Now we're on page 9 of chapter 1, and we're going to have a quick look at something called the BRIC countries. The BRIC countries. The name BRIC comes from Brazil, Russia, India, China. And these countries are considered to be the world's largest emerging economies. Big countries, big populations, and they are emerging. They are starting to develop. So the size of the countries, together with their economic potential, means that they've been predicted that they could be the foremost dominant economies by 2050. One simple thing that companies should therefore be aware of is if they are a true multinational, they should be looking at addressing some of these countries, or at least reviewing whether operations should include these countries. The next thing we're going to have a look at now is something called liberalisation and economic nationalism. What we're seeing over recent years is a trend, and it's a general movement of what is known as trade liberalisation. So there's been a general movement towards freedom of trade in certain parts of the world. The example we've got here is the enlargement of the European Union, of the EU. Now, this makes it easier for countries to trade within it. It also makes it easier for human capital, for individuals to move employment between the countries. That also has a knock-on effect for companies, for organisations, in terms of who they can recruit and who they want to recruit. Liberalisation, economic nationalism. The next topic to look at, outsourcing and offshoring. Outsourcing and offshoring, often used together, but they are slightly different. Outsourcing is where we outsource work which was previously done in-house, and we outsource that to specialist external providers. As an example, we could outsource the calculation of an individual's employment tax obligation. We outsource that to a firm of accountants that specialise in calculating tax liabilities. As you would imagine, there are advantages of outsourcing as well as disadvantages. So let's have a quick look at some of the advantages. The first one, a cost saving. If, for example, you have one person within the organisation that has a very complicated taxation position, he or she does a lot of travelling around the world, it's very complex international tax compliance is required, it would be very expensive to hire an internal tax expert to deal with one person. So by outsourcing the tax compliance for that individual, you would save money, you would save costs. There's a cost savings. Another advantage, access to expertise. You can outsource to companies, to organisations that keep up to date with all the latest technology, all the latest law, all the latest requirements. This next one is quite a nice one, flexibility. When you outsource, it's easier to turn it on and off. You outsource services. You can then end those services if you no longer require them. Obviously, there'll be contracts you need to look at, but generally, it will be a lot easier than employing people, making people redundant, re-employing them. So it's more flexible when you outsource. Let's have a quick look at some of the disadvantages. The first one is quite a concern for some organisations, and that's there's a risk with confidentiality. If you are outsourcing confidential information, you need to ensure that whoever you are outsourcing it to has suitable confidentiality controls in place. The next one, if you outsource, it means you no longer have it in-house because you've outsourced it. If you don't have it in-house, that skill anymore, it means you could lose that skill from within the organisation. And the final one, a potential loss of competitive advantage. After all, if you can outsource, for example, your marketing to a marketing agency, then so can other organisations, other companies as well. You could lose competitive advantage. Now, we talked here about outsourcing. What about offshoring? Offshoring is slightly different. It's when you offshore an internal department. So you relocate a department in another territory. That could be because of cheaper locations, cheaper access to resources, but you are offshoring your own department. Okay, if we move down to page 10 now, we'll have a quick look at different types of economic systems. And there are three main types of economic systems. We have planned, where, as the name suggests, everything is planned by the government. At the other extreme, we have a free market economy, and that's where the individuals decide how resources will be utilised. So the two extremes, planned, the government plans it, free market, individuals decide. As you would imagine, the vast majorities of economies are somewhere in between, a mixed economy. It's an allocation of resources partly by the government and partly by the free market. A transition economy, be aware of the term transition economy, is one which is moving from planned to a free market economy. Okay, the final thing just to have a look at now on this chapter is some of the definitions involving national account balances. So, balance of payments, the first term. These record transactions between residents of one particular country and residents with other countries. So it's the transactions between one country and another and other countries. If you've got a balance of payment deficit, that means there's an outflow of funds. Your balance of payments is a deficit. It means more money is going out of the country than into the country. The opposite one, a balance of payments surplus, is where there are more funds coming into the country than going out of the country. Okay, that finishes this video, and that finishes chapter 1. Thank you very much for listening.